lion women is what it means. And it's a saying that goes back for a long time. It's been used throughout time to refer to strong, fierce women who take no nonsense from anybody.
Welcome to our latest episode of Book Reporter Talks To, and I've been looking forward to this conversation, where our guest today is Marjan Kamali, and we are going to be talking about her latest novel, The LION Women of Tehran. I read this book months ago when we had an early lunch for it, I want to say back in like February, and I loved hearing about this book, hearing the background, and I've been so waiting to share it with you. Our book reporter reviewer, Sarah Rachel Engelman, had this to say about it. More than a tale of friendship or coming-of-age story, The LION Women of Tehran is a beautifully crafted and subtle exploration of love, family, friendship, ambition, betrayal, and redemption in a socio-political power keg. And I think that says a big wrap of exactly what the book is about. And with that, welcome, Marjan. It's so great to see you.
Thank you so much, Carol. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Oh, I'm just looking forward to hearing some of the pieces you've shared with me before and some new pieces. And with that, let's start about, because I know this book has this very interesting origin story. So let's start with that.
Yes, let me tell you how I came to write it. After the stationery shop came out, which I know you and I did a great interview when that book was coming out. After all the promotion and hoopla for that died down to a degree, though it's still going on, I started working on the next book, and I was about 100 pages in when the pandemic started. And like so many people, I was stuck at home. I was scrolling social media. And I remember I was looking at Instagram, and I came across these posts from a friend of mine. This was a friend of mine, not just on social media, but once upon a time, we had been best friends in elementary school in Tehran. And we had played together almost every day. We had done homework together. We had shared our dreams about the kinds of women we'd grow up to be. But we'd also shared our fears because we were young girls living in an autocratic state and living in a time of war. And I spent many nights in the basement as bombs fell outside. And every time I made it back up, I was just so grateful for being given the chance to live. And so when my family left Tehran in a rush with the kettle still on the stove, without saying goodbye to my best friend, and I arrived in New York at the age of 10, I knew I had to live doubly hard for both of us. So then here I am, an author now in the pandemic and lockdown, telling stories in America. And I'm looking again at these posts from my friend, and she currently is working at a human rights organization in Iran. And I started to think of how these friendships we make when we're young truly shape us, and their influence on our lives lasts, even if the friendship doesn't. And, friendship breakups can be just as heart-wrenching as romantic ones. I really believe that. So that's when I knew I had to write the story of a broken friendship. And I chucked the 100 pages or so that I'd already written of that next book. And I started to write The LION Women of Tehran.
Those pages were like your writing exercise. They were like homework that never got handed in. You know what I mean?
That's right. They were just, I don't know, me clearing my throat, practice. Yes.
Yeah, but you were writing, and I think that was the most important thing. And you can write your way into a story. You can't not write if you're not writing. Like you can't sit there if you've got to have, be in the zone and what you're doing. How old were you? Okay, you were 10 when you came here. What year was it? And to put in perspective of what was going on over there.
So I came January 15th, 1982. That was the day of my arrival. I think most people remember their days of arrival into the US. And what was going on over there was the revolution of 1979 had already happened. We were a couple years into it. Laws had already changed. Life had already changed drastically. Most importantly, though, the war had begun, and the war started in September 1980, and it was in full force when I left. And so I experienced the first year and a half of that war until I came here.
Like the hiding in the basement and wondering what was going to happen.
Mhm.
It's really interesting because I think we hear about things. I remember hearing about this. I remember reading about it. But to talk to somebody who was there, that left the kettle on the stove and ran, did you just get different paths? Like, how did you leave the country? I'm just curious.
Well, it wasn't like we were some people I know, they fled in far more dramatic ways. They hid under sheepskins disguised as sheep to cross the border. They had to do all kinds of crazy things. Ours was actually much more sedate. We got on a plane, it was official. We had papers, we were allowed to leave. But I think what stayed with me the most was this idea that I was the one who got away.
Mhm.
And, I remember being on that plane, I was in a position of privilege, being on that plane, thinking of the people who I'd left behind, and particularly this friend of mine, because we had been such close friends, like attached at the hip. And just thinking about the randomness of the Wheel of Fortune,
Mhm.
how some people have the opportunity to leave, some people choose not to leave, some people can't leave. That I think is what has stayed with me the most, because the people who leave um, have what we call survivor's guilt to an
Mhm.
extent.
Mhm. Of what was left behind. You're hitting on a line that's very early in the book when Ellie sees this homeless woman, and
Mhm.
she's got the silent quote, the silent acknowledgement of the randomness of the wheel of fortune. And there's so much packed into that line because what she notices is this woman is not completely down on her luck. She has great teeth. Like she hasn't been, and I remember like that line, like just jumped out at me because it is random. Like you see somebody on the street, you see somebody wherever. How did they get there and you didn't? And for you to be seeing that woman as this girl, young girl, has this piece of pizza in her hand that she's dying to eat and just gives her that and all the money because she realizes that's something she can do. It's such a powerful, part of the book, and it's early. It's very early.
Yeah, those are the opening pages. And I really wanted to ground the reader in New York City of this is now the early 80s, I believe. And Ellie is working at Bloomingdale's. She's 38. She's doing her very best, but she sees that homeless woman and is reminded of the randomness of the Wheel of Fortune. And it is, that saying there, but for the grace of God go I.
Mhm.
And I was hoping it would also reveal a little bit about Ellie's character, that the pizza slice she has so been looking forward to and is just so craving, she gives to the homeless woman. And then, of course, she is reminded of this childhood friend of hers and just this complete difference in the paths that their lives took over
Yeah,
the
they
past
completely
10
diverged. You're sitting next to each
years.
other in school for a long time, and then the lives go like this in completely different directions. So her
Yes.
friend Homa was bold from the start. She wanted to be a judge. I love that. And she was looking into how to study for that. We should study to be judges. This is what we should be doing. And she says, sometimes you have to break the law, Ellie. Sometimes you can't do what everybody's telling you. Some laws are stupid and unfair and absurd. But through the book, we see that the laws are not always fair, especially for women.
Mhm.
And it's set up at the beginning of we're going to have to be the people who judge. We're going to have to be the people that do this. And to see that that's taken away, any opportunity to do that. Way up front in the book, you're seeing we have to break the law. And
Sometimes people like Homa believe that. I made Homa of the two friends. So we have Ellie and we have Homa.
right.
And Ellie is our protagonist, and she's very sort of, um, she has her flaws, her biggest flaw being that she just has a jealous trait and she gets jealous easily. But she also covets the better things in life, the more sort of materialistic things in life, and she's less brave. But Homa is incredibly passionate, incredibly authentic to what she believes. She's the kind of person who takes action, and I wanted to draw that contrast. And Homa, early on in their friendship, that she can't be fake. Homa has zero ability to be two-faced or
Yes.
fake or to put on airs, but she's deeply concerned about the rights of women, the rights of people in the country in general, that she believes in equality for all. And sometimes she says when the laws are unfair, then they should be broken. But it's Homa's dream in life to be a lady judge, to be a judge, right? And at that time in Iran, this would have been the first generation of girls to go to school to study to be judges and to become judges. And that's the generation I'm writing about. They then did become judges until they were disrobed.
Until there was disrupt. So there was privilege that was given and it was very quickly taken away.
Exactly.
You know, Ellie, let's go to Ellie's mom for a second because she's concerned with status, money, material things. And she takes very interesting steps, and readers will figure out what they are to get them. And she's got her own way of maneuvering for self-preservation. Like she's doing exactly what she needs to do. And she fights for the life that she wants in this very different way. And she's, though, a lioness towards her daughter and wanting her daughter to be really good. Am I right about that? Is that the lion? Because the Lion Women of Tehran is in many different ways. It's women who take care of their children, I feel, and the women that are fighting for justice. Am I on the right track?
You are on the right track. You are. You know, lion women literally translates to sheer zan in Persian, and lion women is what it means, and it's a saying that goes back for a long time. It's been used throughout time to refer to strong, fierce women who take no nonsense from
Mhm.
anybody. And you are right to see it in that way, Carol, because Ellie's mom, in her own way, is protecting Ellie. Now, we may not agree with her methods and we may not agree with her values per se, but in her heart, she believes she's doing the best for her daughter and that she's doing right by her.
Mhm.
And she takes certain actions that result in Ellie moving back uptown to the more rarefied, richer neighborhood after they have to live downtown once Ellie's dad dies. So Ellie's mom, in her own mind, is a lion woman, but Homa sure is. Throughout the book, I feel like Homa probably exemplifies courage and bravery, and Ellie wants to be a lion woman, but from the very beginning, she says, I'm just a little cub. I'm trying. She doesn't come as naturally to her.
No, she's more like the cub that's playing. She's not the cub that's fighting. It's like a very, very
Yeah.
different thing.
Yes.
And Ellie's mother judges all of her friends because she
Mm.
wants her to be on some kind of level. Who's riffraff? And we don't understand her, but then we find out much later in the book what her mother went through personally that doesn't come out at the beginning. By parsing the story, and I feel that you as a storyteller do such a good job of giving you what you need to know here, but there's something here, and there's something here. When you're doing that, when you're parsing out the story of her life, was it planned? Did you know her whole story from the first, or did you later on say, this is why she is the way she is?
In the first draft, I didn't know her story. I often don't know the story, the full story of any of the characters in that first draft. So for me, when I'm writing the first draft, I'm discovering the story and I'm discovering the characters. And sometimes they exemplify characteristics that I find befuddling. For example, Ellie's mom, I'm confused. Why is she like this? What would make her like this? And then as I write the book, the backstory reveals itself to me, the writer, and then I see, aha. So if somebody went through that, that might make them like this. But then when I go back to do the second draft or the third or the fourth, I'm super careful to not reveal it all to you, the reader, um, all at once. I think part of storytelling is the art of knowing what to reveal when. And that's really what makes a story. Otherwise, we would just be journalists writing a news article. But the art of storytelling is to order the information so that it provides the maximum emotional impact on the reader.
Right.
And that's why I save some things
Yeah.
and then I share it with the reader later on and have them later hopefully understand what made these people the way they are.
Yeah. And when I sat there and I saw that about her, I'm like, oh wow, now I get it. Now I get why she was so protective of herself and of her daughter. And I didn't get it at the beginning. So
Good.
that the reveal of the characters is like, a really huge thing. And can you give us a brief overview? Because I think that some readers are not going to remember this, of the Shah's White Revolution, first in 1963. So what happens first in 63? Because this book arcs over decades. And I think that's what readers need to know is there's one Iran at the beginning and it changes as time goes on.
Yes, Iran changes so much. So the book covers, I mean, the backdrop of the story is the 1950s, 60s, 70s, early 80s, and then there's another time period, which I'm not going to reveal because that's the spoiler.
Well,
But the Shah's White Revolution, it was just a series of laws that were enacted in the early 60s. They were all encompassing, but the part that I'm most interested in are the laws that affected women. I mean, there were land reforms, farm laws that changed, but women got the right to vote, and women received family and reproductive rights through that time period, an expansion of their rights. The marriage age was raised, for example, and inheritance laws became more favorable to women, as did divorce and child custody laws. So these were incredible gains
mhm.
that women made in the early 1960s. And those were exactly the rights that they lost after 1979.
Wow. So it was everybody had moved to a different place. You didn't have to cover your head at that time during
Now, during the Shah's time, so Iran has had, if you go way back in its history, like many other countries, including the United States, I would say, there was a time when if you left the house, most people covered their hair.
Mhm.
Even in the West, people wore hats way more than they do now. And culturally in Iran, people did cover their hair, men and women. But it wasn't mandated by law, except it was just common practice. Then in the 1930s, the Shah's father, in an attempt to westernize Iran, actually went the other way, where he wanted women not to cover. So you had even instances of police forces ripping a headscarf off a woman's head, which created a sense of violation because that was something that felt deeply, almost like an assault. So, but then over the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, it became really a choice. So if you wanted to cover, you did. If you didn't want to cover, you didn't. It was as simple as that. And there was a time in Iran where some women chose, because they wanted to, wear the hijab, and many chose not to. But what is pretty significant is that after the revolution in the early 80s, it was mandated by law and
Mhm.
it was enforced through imprisonment and fines and arrests. And it became an issue that it didn't even need to become because it almost like ruined that desire that should have been very personal. It should have been a personal choice. It made it a very political and ugly thing where people are still arguing about it now.
Yeah. And the young woman, I think it's now a couple of years ago, who was killed in the square for not wearing. At what point were you writing when that happened? Because I have no sense of time since 2020, I confess.
Yes, it's all a big blur since the pandemic. I had started writing The Lion Women of Tehran. I had started the story of Ellie and Homa and their childhood. I was more than halfway done, really, when a young woman in real life in Iran, Mahsa Gina Amini, a young Kurdish Iranian woman, was arrested for wearing improper hijab, and she was later killed while in police custody. And this felt like the last straw.
Mhm.
People were outraged because there was just this huge sense of injustice. And it sparked a movement where especially women and girls poured into the streets, men too, in support. And it was a deeply emotional time. And like so many people in the diaspora, I watched with hope, I watched with heartbreak as these women took to the streets. It was September 2022, and it lasted throughout that fall.
Wow. And we think back on that time, it was 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago.
Almost 2 years
And,
ago.
and then you're writing this book, and then you're seeing a new wave of outrage, a new wave of what's going on. So it's what all the changes remains the same because it's still the same problem. It's a circular.
Yeah, you said it. You said it, Carol. It's this endless cycle of protests, clampdowns, protests, crackdowns, protests, and then they're suffocated, they're quieted down, they are killed, and they are told to be quiet. So it does sometimes feel like an endless cycle. But that being said, it was a very difficult and emotional and tragic time for the people in Iran, and even those of us in the diaspora watching from afar. And many people died. And it did create some small changes in the culture, I would say, but it's a fight that continues.
Yeah. We had a woman that was working with us when we first started the company, and she would explain that when she went home to Iran, she would have to put the scarf on. The pilot would come on as you got into Iranian airspace. And this is 28 years ago, and I still remember her telling me this story. And she is, as soon as you fly in, that's what you have to do. And what happened with the Shah? What happened to the Shah when he left the country? Where was he taken? How did America? And she had a completely different perspective on this, of a story that I probably didn't pay that much attention to growing up. And then all of a sudden, it just shows from hearing other people's points of view how you can understand something, which is what you're doing in this book, is bringing the story to us in a story. But this is what happened. This is where we were.
This is where there's a lot of historical events that are the backdrop to Ellie and Homa's friendship that are real, that occurred. That's the world they live in. They live as children, as girls in the 1950s in Iran, in an Iran that feels like it's got a democratically elected prime minister at first, and it's just expanding and blossoming, at least Tehran, the city, with publishing and cinema and theaters and cafe culture. And then there's a coup d'etat, and then the Shah solidifies his power. And then there are pluses and minuses to all of that when it comes to the rights of women. Certain things for women did get better, but there was also no freedom of speech per se. There were still many challenges. However, then the revolution happened, the 1979 revolution, and it made everything just so much darker. These are the real life events, as you say, that are happening in the background, but the core of the Lion Women of Tehran is this friendship. And it's a friendship between two people who come from really different stations in life, but who find in one another and in one another's company a way to kind of get through life. Just, I think at one point, Ellie says, it just was more fun to be able to laugh at things with her. It's not like bad things didn't happen. They still did. But during the time that she had her friendship with Homa, they could laugh about it. They could joke about it. They could just talk about it. Those are the things she misses when their friendship gets ruptured.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because to backtrack, Ellie had a very elegant, fabulous lifestyle. Her father passes away. She has to move to what is more the working class kind of an area. And that's where she meets Homa, and they become friends. And her mother doesn't understand like why she loves going over to this girl's house where they make food. And her mother's used to having food made for her. She doesn't understand why the two of them want to sneak into the bazaar. Why would you want to do that? That's like, we send people to the bazaar, we don't do it. So for a while, Ellie tastes this very different life with Homa. It's not her life, but she can be a part of it in a way that you probably get the closest to it. And then her mother marries, and they become wealthy again, and they move. And all of a sudden, what happens to her too is interesting, because when Homa and she can reunite, she sort of puts her back on her, because she's used to her more bourgeois friends, her friends that are wealthy, her friends, and she doesn't see that friend the same way. And it's a really that story of friendship and how it changes through the years and how it comes together. So that's not a question. I think that's a statement.
That's a very good observation about Ellie's situation. And you sort of you homed in on the actual situation that occurs a lot with class
Yes.
differences,
Yes.
because sometimes our friends come from a different class or a different background than us, and their lived experience is supremely different. And you're right, Ellie's mother can't for the life of her understand why her daughter would want to spend time with this girl who, she considers inferior, from a lower class. She considers them to live in poverty. But I was hoping to show the richness of Homa's family life,
Yeah.
the richness in their love and in their connection and in the food. And in a way, Homa may have far less money, but she has what Ellie so desperately wants.
Yeah, it's that sense of family, that sense of some people really caring about her. And what's really interesting is Homa never says, I want to go to your house. Let's go to your house. But she's not bringing that up because she really enjoys her life. And I think that says something too about some people are very, very comfortable with where they are and there's joy. And other people will say, oh, they can't be happy because they don't have X. And you talk a lot about like the material things and how they really matter or don't. And I think it's a very strong thing to think about, especially even in this country right now, of what matters. What matters is it being a billionaire. I mean, sometimes I look at how much money some people have, and it's like so crazy that you can't even think about it. Is my yacht bigger than your yacht? We had a friend one time, and I said, if you had a plane, and he goes, no, 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 somebody's always got a bigger plane. And I'm like, it's really like that. That's how competitive, life ends up becoming. And Hoba doesn't sit there and go, I want Ellie's life. She's completely happy with where she is. And that's so interesting.
And that's what makes Homa so magnetic and charismatic. And that's what makes people want to be with Homa.
Mhm.
She's not trying so hard. She
Right.
doesn't want what Ellie has. She doesn't want Ellie's later when Ellie moves back uptown. She doesn't want Ellie's mansion. She doesn't want Ellie's furniture from France. She doesn't want Ellie's dresses, even though Ellie gives her one.
Yeah.
She doesn't want Ellie's money later when Ellie offers to help her financially. Um, Homa is who she is and is comfortable in her own skin. And I think of all the things in this world, that is perhaps what Ellie is most jealous of,
Yes.
because Homa is content. And Homa is Homa. She's always going to be Homa. It doesn't matter what happens to her. We know some very bad things happen to her, but she manages to be herself. And that means she manages to be free.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's free like all along, no matter where she is, no matter what's happening with her. The word lionhearted comes up. And I love that, over and over again. And you explain that word. Can you explain it more as to the story here, what lionhearted means to you? Because different people become lionhearted as the book goes on, and you didn't think of them as lionhearted at the beginning, and you see them later on as they had to do something to take care of their cubs. They had to do something to take care of their family.
Yeah, there's a lot of courage that's a common thread throughout the book. In the beginning, Ellie doesn't have the courage. She's aware that she doesn't, and she feels terribly about it. But she hopefully throughout her arc in this story learns to come into her own courage. Homa always has the courage from the time she's 7 years old until the very end of the book. And we won't say how old she is because that too is a spoiler. Um, but I think being lion-hearted is a common theme, especially because throughout this book, there's so many intersections of joy and sorrow,
Yeah.
where you have tremendous joy and then things happen where that joy is stripped
Mhm.
from the character. And being lion-hearted, in my personal opinion, means being able to be joyful despite the many, 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 many sorrows that the cards in life hand you. Um, it's not really about, climbing a mountain or battling a dragon. I just think joy is a form of resistance.
Mhm.
And for Homa to own her own joy, That's how she's Lionhearted. She refuses. She even says at one point in the book, I refuse. She refuses to let the bastards, if I may say so, get her down.
That's exactly. And being a mother changes something for her as well, because then she becomes someone who doesn't really want to protest the same way. She's got somebody to protect. And she recognizes this is somebody I'm protecting at this point. Yes, I can go out and fight for all women, but right now I'm fighting for my child. And motherhood comes up again and again in the book and what it means for women and
Mhm.
what happens to them along the way, what it brings out in them. And I feel like that alone could spark a really long book group discussion of just what that happens along the way, how you change, and you're just going to be fighting for your kids and fighting for everything to go well, you know?
Yeah, I'm so happy you brought that up, Carol, because that is definitely another theme in the book. We see what Ellie's mother does, and we may or may not agree with her choices. But obviously, Homa, like you said, once she is a mother, she realizes she can fight for every woman in the country, or she can fight for her daughter, and she has to make some difficult, difficult choices. The balancing act we all have to. And there's also Ellie's version of motherhood, which is not what she had ever expected it to be, but she comes into this own imperfect version of motherhood that she learns to embrace and to appreciate. And it's just this continuous sort of cycle where the courage is necessary in order to protect their children. And there's a minor character in the book, uh, one of Ellie's other friends, Susan, who she has a very difficult sort of situation, though seemingly she's doing wonderfully. She's like living the life with her wealth and, like you
Right.
said, yacht sort of situation. But she has sacrifices she has to make because she's a mother.
Yeah, she's the mother, and she's also constantly watching what's going on around her because her
Mhm.
life isn't any more safe than anybody else's is. It just has the perception that it is because of where she is.
Exactly.
Did the arc of the book come to you at once, or was there, you say 3, 4 versions of it? Do you remember the earlier versions, or when it's done, do you sit there and say, "Oh, yeah, that's exactly the way I was thinking about it"?
Oh gosh, no, it does not come to me in one go. I wish it did. It would make my life a lot easier. It comes in bits and pieces over time, over months, over years, literally. So
Mhm.
I knew the friendship arc. I knew what the rupture would be early on. But I didn't know how the repair would occur. And it took a lot of I wouldn't even say like trial and error. It was mostly a lot of thinking. I had to do a lot of thinking, a lot of soul searching, and I had to really understand these two women. I had to understand them so well that they were almost a part of me.
Mhm.
And one thing that truly helped me understand the arc of the book, oddly, was real life events. Because as I was writing it, things were happening in Iran. And so, in a way, history wrote the end for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's say coming together. Okay. When you say you're doing that thinking part, are you sitting at a desk thinking, or are you doing your life thinking? Like, do you sit down and say, I've got to do, like people say, 100 words a day or 1,000 words a day? Or do you say, I've got to sit here and think for 2 hours? Because so much of writing is thinking.
So much of writing is thinking. I am not a words per day kind of gal. I know a lot of writers who are, and that's their process and that helps them. That completely intimidates me because there's some days I may write 1,000 words, and there's some days I may write two, and there's some days I may write zero. It doesn't mean that the day I wrote 1,000 words was a better day. It
Mhm.
just means I wrote more words. It's quality, not quantity. And a lot of it I do by hand. And because I do so much of my writing by hand, I don't even count the words. The thinking, Carol, often takes place on walks. I
Mm.
find being in motion is really helpful. Sometimes I'm at my desk right here where I'm talking to you, and sometimes I may be sitting here thinking, hmm. But a lot of times I'm on a walk, and it might be mile two, where suddenly I'll think, oh my gosh, yes, that's what Homa needs to do. And, usually it's when you're not consciously thinking
Mhm.
about it. You're thinking,
Mhm.
oh, look at this beautiful flower. And then you realize what Homa needs to do.
Yeah. I often say I do my best thinking on airplanes, especially
Oh,
before they had Wi-Fi.
yes. Oh, I never do the Wi-Fi on the airplane. I want that time.
The time of there was a couple of weeks that I went to California 3 times in 5 weeks, and it was, as much as it was crazy, it was probably the best thinking time I had. And it's like that moment where nobody can get back to you really quickly unless you turn on the Wi-Fi. Nobody can really talk to you, and you're just going to sit there and say, well, what do I want to do with the company? What do I want to do with the book reporter? What do you want? And it's, you're just going to come up with a great idea because you're not doing the which is like typing. You know, you're doing
Yeah,
the oh, what I can do.
such a sacred space,
Yeah.
that airplane time.
Yep.
And you know, you're literally suspended, right? Between two worlds. It feels like a bubble. I know that's why I don't like to do the Wi-Fi. I don't, I try to avoid even watching the movies, even though
Mhm.
it's so tempting, because I remember the days when I would just stare out the window and
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. And it's, you sometimes you're someplace and like, why did I never come up with this before? Why did I never want to do this before? And it's because you're caught up in the day to day of what's happening. You know, there's something else that happens in the book is that you love to cook, and there is food that is interspersed without this book, which is a huge nod to something that happens later. And there was this recipe book that was created, and it was really interesting. I have a copy of it here. And this was given out to booksellers, you know, early on, and it's got recipes in it. And what I really loved is, like, I really want to make that Persian ice cream. Like, that's on my list.
That's a life changer.
That's a
That's a
life
life
changer right there.
changer.
And
Mhm.
then the one that everybody was talking about was the salad Olivier. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah,
Salad?
yeah. Well, yes, we say salad Olivier, which is really, it's a Russian dish that made its way to Iran because, you know, Iran and the Soviet Union shared a border. So there's a lot of Russian influence. And oh my gosh, yes, that is the sandwich that Ellie and Homa love when they're in high school and they go to Cafe Andre. That's a real cafe. My mom went to that cafe.
I love
She
it.
did get the salad Olivier.
Yes, it's a salad. And then when she gets one for somebody else, it's like a special moment. I mean, they're just great things that happen with food. Do you love to cook? Do you love to cook?
I love to cook. Cooking is my joy, it's my therapy. I love, you know, the idea that you can make something out of nothing. I mean, out of raw ingredients, but I love this sense of creativity cooking gives you. I love that you can do something so beautiful with it. You can
Mhm.
feed your loved ones, and I love the color, the texture of different foods. Yeah, I'm a big foodie, big
And this,
cook.
and the seasonality of them. Last week we were on the way back. I had done an event down at the beach, and on the way back we stopped at the blueberry capital of the world. Who knew?
There's that.
In New Jersey. Starts with an H. Haddonstown, New Jersey. I have to remember the name of town. So we went there and we bought a crate of blueberries, like a, you know, boxes and boxes of blueberries. And it's like, what can you make with this over the next couple of days? And I brought something to a party on Saturday. And then, well, what else can we create? And I know I'm going to go down the rabbit hole of, like, you know, what to make with these. And we also had fresh peaches shipped up from Georgia. Don't ask me in February how I ordered 12 peaches to come every week for 4 weeks. I must have been, my husband goes, are there more peaches coming today? And I was like, yes, we just finished the others. Now more are coming. But they were like the precious peaches. So you'd put them with mozzarella. You wouldn't want to put them just in a pie. Like, no, 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 no. This had to be more special. So it's just really interesting when you start doing food. Food is a form of creativity. And it's
Yes.
feel like if you're blocked writing, or if I'm blocked on something to do, well, I can still make dinner. I can
That's
still make
right. That's right. I'm the same way. I'm the same way. I totally hear you. Just doing something with your hands, you know, that has this tangible result. And it's satisfying because a lot of times in your work, you feel like you're not getting that result. And so yeah, it's wonderful. It's a
it,
gift.
to be able to go in and to feed others, or to go someplace where you can sit there and say, well, wait, I would do this, this, and this. Like sometimes even when you're on vacation or you're traveling on business, you see something like, oh, I want to go home and make that. I'm going to figure out how to go do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same way. We're kindred spirits. And sometimes when I'm on vacation, I said this once to a friend of mine and she thought I was absolutely off my rocker. But sometimes when I'm on vacation, I miss cooking.
Well, we used to rent houses where you could cook. And we're going out to Colorado and sometime in August. And I'm just sitting there like, well, wait, do we stay in a hotel room? Oh gosh, no, how are we going to do that? We have to
When
stay someplace where
tired of not cook of
no,
eating
where we're
out.
going to get the food, because usually we had gone to the Outer Banks for years. We had a little kit of spices we'd bring with us so that we had, and knives and things that people would want. And there was one time we rented a house and we brought a small Cuisinart with us because we'd rented the house before, and we left it there. And the next time we went down, we took it back.
Oh
And I
my,
was like, who rented in between that said, oh, this one came with a little Cuisinart?
yeah, how convenient. This is another level. I'm getting good tips from you. This is another level. I don't think I've traveled with spices and knives, but I very well may now.
Well, I tell you, if you go on a road trip and you're going to be cooking someplace, it's having the right equipment, either
Yeah.
that or, and if you rent a house, this is a little tip, at the end of the summer, usually a lot of the dishes, the glasses, and the forks are gone. So if you go into the house that everybody's been renting all year,
Right, right.
they say to rental companies, you've got to replenish in August because everybody's broken the stuff. It's like gone. And
Yeah.
you have to think about this. It's just all these really crazy things.
Yes. Ellie would like this. Ellie
Ellie
would
would like this. She'd be on top of
she'd
it.
be taking notes. Yes.
Yes. So for readers who love the stationery shop, they're going to find a lot of similar themes here about family and life and women and powerful and whatever. And
Yes.
I feel like if you're watching and you haven't read the stationery shop, that's what you do after you read this book. And if you've read the stationery shop, of course you've been waiting for the Lion Women. I mean, you've been waiting to see this book. So
Yeah.
as you're sitting there, you're looking at character, you're looking at whatever. Do you think about your characters that were in the stationery shop and where they are now? Do you think of Homa and Ellie and what happened and pieces in between after you're done? Or are you like done?
Oh, I am never done with them. They stay with me forevermore, for better or for worse. So as I was writing The Women of Tehran, I was still thinking about the characters in the stationery shop. I mean, I was also talking about them a ton in book club visits
Yeah.
and in events. So they were with me, but they're just always with me. And in The Women of Tehran, there is one little Easter egg about the stationery shop. You noticed it?
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
there's an illusion there. Um, they're always with me. The Ellie and Homa will always be with me. My stationery shop the main four characters in that book will always be with me. The mother and daughter from Together Tea will always be with me. They kind of become a part of you because you spend so much time with them. You are with them day in, day out, creating them, thinking about them, worrying about them, wanting the best for them. Yes, and I would say, Carol, it's going to be absolutely clear when you read this book, The Lion Women of Tehran, that it was written by the author of The Stationery Shop, because there's so many echoes. And I didn't do that on purpose. It's just like I can't help it. That's what I do.
It's
So
just
there's some
yeah.
big similarities.
Yeah, and writing about love and writing about love between a man and a woman and writing about love at younger ages and older ages and what it means going back and forth. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
okay, you threw out 150 pages. You went from 4 characters and said you were going to do these 2. Like I read the author's note at the back because people always read,
Oh, right. Yes, I
but don't
forgot
read
about
at the beginning, read the author's note at the end.
that.
And so you read like all these things have happened. So you've got these 4 versions. When do your agent and editor see it? Do they see it at stage 2, stage 4, when you're comfortable, when you need help, and when?
So my agent, the lovely Wendy Sherman, she saw it early on. She was there from the beginning. She was there from the early chapters of the book that wasn't written, right? The one I ended up chucking. She saw it early on. But then it was sort of a lot of time spent without my current editor seeing it. She, by the time it got to her, it was pretty much finished. And then she gave me her notes, which were very valuable, which were mostly me adding certain elements.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I would say it really depends on the book. Every book is different. But from the very early pages, Wendy did see it. My agent did see it.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I know your editor and she's younger. And I
Mhm.
think that also that perspective definitely lent itself to the book as well, because we see things, we've been moms, we've been raising children, this, that, the other, and her coming in was very impressive because I could see how Hannah could lend something to the book and lend like ideas, because there are things we know that need to be explained a little bit more to a reader that hasn't been through this. Am I right on that one?
No, you are right. Hannah is the youngest editor I've had. It's the first time that my editor for a book is younger than me, right? That
Right.
hasn't happened before.
Right.
But it was a wonderful perspective. It was a wonderful perspective because, like you were saying, Carol, a lot of the events, especially in the 70s, are events you and I lived through and took for granted. And then, it's a good reminder that there are younger readers who did not, they have no clue. They didn't live through the revolution, right? The way we did. Whether you were there in Iran or in the US, it was here. It was part of the world events. And so yeah, it was fun. It was great. And I loved Hannah's perspective on things. She had some really good insights too about the way the mother and daughter relationship would get resolved. That was pretty key.
That's
That was
okay. Yeah, it is key because you learn a lot. And like, oh, now I get it. Now I get it. And it's I remember the embassy being taken over because we actually had a friend whose daughter had been there. And that was, so we were living through that story of what was happening. And then you remember as soon as the president was changed, it was immediately then everybody was cleared out of the airspace and everybody flew out. And you realized then at a very young age how politics really mattered so very much.
yeah.
Of I was
Like they were magically released the day Reagan became president. Like, come on, there was so much going on behind the scenes.
right. And it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. As soon as the inauguration's over, bingo, plane takes off. And what was going on behind the scenes on that? And we read the papers every day and we really don't know what's going on because we are never going to know. I interviewed an author a couple of months ago whose husband was in the army, and he said he could pick up the paper in the morning and go, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. But he said, nobody knows because it's not told. But he said, I could pick out the things that didn't work, that aren't right. And it's just, we don't know everything all day. We'd like to know it, but we don't know it. It just not
You
works.
are so right. We'd like to think we know, and
Yes.
we'd like to think we're being told, but we aren't.
No.
And then sometimes it becomes so massively clear.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just for your self-preservation that you don't need to know of what's going
That's
on.
true, because then you would truly lose your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Remember, like, the Ayatollah and all these, these moments of, but even as old as I was at the time going, through those things, I didn't really know what was happening. Like we knew words, we knew what was in the paper, but it was all very top line. And to see it against the backdrop of what's happening in two people's lives, look, this is not a deep history book, folks. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is this is happening, and this is how these people go into the food store. This is how and this is what real life is going on while everything else is raging around you. Put your headscarf on, take your headscarf off. This is what you're doing. You
That's
know?
right. That's right. And sometimes even when you're living it, you don't know.
Mm-mm,
Like Homa is there. Homa is living it day to day in Iran. And half the time, the people there didn't know
mm-mm.
because it
What's
was just
happening?
so confusing and murky sometimes.
Yeah, of what's getting like what's really going on.
Exactly.
Was the title always The Lion Women of Tehran?
It was not. I had a different title. My title was a bit silly now that I think about it, but I was super attached to it, but then I wasn't attached to it.
Right.
Um, the Lion Women of Tehran, that title is sort of like the Big W, if you remember that movie, where like I kept trying to find a great title, my agent kept trying to find a great title, then my editor, Hannah, and the publisher came back and said, The Lion Women of Tehran. And at first I was like, no, because that seemed too obvious almost
Yeah.
as a title. But since then, I know people tell me they love the title. And so I think they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, the title really works. And it was okay. We don't want to be a story about war. Is Tehran going to, say this, that, but no, it just works. But I think it also works with the cover, and with the cover and what's everything is happening. Was this the first cover you saw, or was there a lot of maneuvering on that as well?
No, this was the first cover. This was the cover I saw. Very little was changed from the original version. We did give, you see, that's a bird on the
Yes,
top, the
yes,
beautiful purple and gold and pink. we did give the bird a little pedicure. At first, her claws were a little too sharp and it made her look a bit fangy and kind of mean, but we gave her a pedicure. Other than that, it was pretty much, we added the border, I think. That's it. It was it's beautiful. I take no credit. It was all the designers, beautiful artwork, I believe. I think it's Lisa Litwack. I could be misspeaking. I believe she's the art designer, and it's just amazing, amazing. I love it. And you and I are both honoring the cover with our outfits
That's
too.
exactly. I went and changed. I said, I've got to go do something so that we match the cover.
I love it, and I did the same.
It's the same. You
And
have
it
your pink
worked.
sweater to go on the road with. There you go. You're
Yeah.
starting a big tour tomorrow. Tomorrow, you're
Mhm.
going to be, I'm hoping to see you in New York. You're going to be in New York and
I'm
Bryant
going to be in New
Park.
York on July 23rd
Uh,
at PT Knitwear in the evening and at Bryant Park midday on July 24th.
I'm
Yes.
trying to catch you midday on July 24th. I'm like, I would love to see you in person because it's been a while, you know?
I know. I would love to see you. And in the meantime, we launch in Boston tomorrow night, and then there's a big West Coast tour, Midwest, and then back to the
You
East
have
Coast.
a huge tour. You have a huge tour. Everyone go out to her website. There's a huge tour and she'll be signing books there and you want to be a part of this. Here's another thing. Mozan Navabi, I'm hoping I'm doing this right, and Mickey Masood narrate the audiobook. Have you heard it yet? And do they each play a different character? I'm trying to figure out how their voices work.
Yes, so I was sent a sample literally a few days ago. That's the first time I heard. Mojan is reading Ellie, so
Okay.
she's Ellie's voice, and Nikki is Homa. So I've just heard a tiny, tiny sample. I know they've done a fantastic job because Mojan also did the audio for the stationery shop.
Good.
And from my book club visits, I know that fans of the audio, they are many. They love how she did it. So yeah, that's exciting. That also comes out tomorrow, July 2nd.
So what we'll do too is we'll have an audio clip at the end of those who are listening on the podcast. So here's a big question. Do you have an idea of what's next, or do you need to get on an airplane?
Oh, Carol, I need to get on an airplane, go on like a 7 mile walk, hopefully. I need to just really go within. You know, what happens with these books is when they come out, it's a whole different part of you. You're out there, you're promoting, you're meeting people, which I love. I
Right.
love connecting with the readers because it's like this thing I did by myself in this room is suddenly something that can move other people. But
Right.
yes, and I will have to go back inward, close the door, pull down the shades, just sort of sit down quietly and begin the next one.
Yeah. And you know, when you're on the road and you're traveling and then you come back and then you do book clubs. So
Yeah.
you're really immersed. And with the book clubs, I think it's interesting because you hear what they got out of the book. And so many times people say, I didn't even know I wrote that. Like I didn't even know I
Oh,
went
yeah.
there. You know?
I know. I love visiting book clubs, and at every book club, I learn something new about my book. I kid you not.
Right.
Someone says something I did not know about either a connection I didn't even realize I was doing. Maybe it was subconscious. They tell me something about the name of a character that echoes something else. They tell me thematic stuff I didn't realize. It's so beautiful. I love learning from the book clubs.
And it's also seeing how your work resonates with people, which character they love, who they think they are. You know, they're just, and there's an excellent book club discussion for this book that's on Marjan's website. So if you go there, you go to the book page, you go to the book club page, the guide is there. So if you need some direction on what to do, including, I think there's some ideas behind like where the story came from. And I think that there are things for you to think about as a group. And I think that sometimes we need direction on what to talk about. Or if you have your own discussion, which my group is apt to do, at the end, look at the questions and see what you didn't think about, you know, one way or the other.
Yes, I can already tell with this book when I bring up what it's about, just like at a cocktail party, people start telling me about their childhood friend. And
Mhm.
I love that. I love that. I was at a wedding just this weekend, and at my table, someone said, "What's the new book about?" And I told him, and he said, "You know what? I don't think I'd be here today if I didn't have my childhood friend X."
Mm. Oh,
Yeah, so it's such a common sort of universal thing. We all have that a friend from childhood who helps shape us.
And it's funny because sometimes I'll see pictures of people on Facebook and will say their birthday party. And I'm like, ha, but I was at your 7th birthday party. I was at your 5th. You know what I mean? It's like, forget, like, X birthday. I was there at the beginning,
I know,
Those
it's so
exciting moments.
special. It's such a special bond.
Yeah.
And it doesn't go away even if you lose touch.
Yeah.
That's what I feel to be true.
Yeah. You're going to pick up and keep having the same conversations.
Yes.
Well, I look forward to seeing you, readers. I look forward to hearing what you think about this book. We have winners. We had 25 people win copies of this book. They're already writing me and loving it. And I'm hearing such great perspectives. And that's what I love, is like our readers really get involved and they also share. And that's what it makes it very, very special. So congratulations. It's like,
Thank you, Carol. Thank you.
It's book 3. Here we go, folks, on the road again, but the biggest tour that you've been on, and you're going to be kind of everywhere,
I am, and I can't wait to see the readers all over this country and to share this story with them. And thank you, Carol, for this great conversation. I always love talking to you.
We always have a good time, so I'm glad to. I will be cooking. That ice cream is going to be on the menu.
You have to have the ice cream.
Yes.
I'm telling you.
We will be going for it, and it's especially since it's got pistachios, and my son who's allergic is away, so we will do that this week. Here we go.
Okay, now's the
time. Thank you so much for your time. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Carol.
To everybody else, we look forward to seeing you next time on Book Reporter Talks To.